You want to go downstairs? Do you? Want to go downstairs? Hi vinyl community, Elliot here, Lazy Dogs Records, and I thought I'd do a little something today for the vinyl community about some artists that I've been following for 40 plus years now. Had the opportunity last night, had to drive a little distance, about 75 miles, but a friend of mine and I drove to Nash County, North Carolina, to the beautiful town of Nashville, where the Nash County Arts Center is located. And we had the opportunity to see a one-off show by Bill Lyerly, Clyde Mattocks, Jason Patterson, and Jason Smith. Now, names probably don't mean much to you unless you're in the Carolinas, but Bill Lyerly and Clyde Mattocks founded together one of the North Carolina institutions in music, Grit Cowboy Band. And this is their debut album. And there is there's Clyde and there's Bill. And that is 13 right there, the fiddler extraordinaire in the band. And they put out this album. Bill left after a couple of years to form his own band and put out some 45s and a couple of albums. Bill Lyerly Band here, Prodigal Son and Higher Ground. Bill was with RCA for a little while. He put out a couple of singles that didn't chart. He eventually left RCA and kept his producer, an independent producer named Roy Day in Nashville, who was producing his stuff for RCA, stayed with him, and they put out those two albums. And meanwhile, Super Grit was continuing to roam across the eastern seaboard, and they put out albums like If You Can't Hang, Drag Your Country Ass Home, and Showing Our, and you can see that, Showing Our, is it class or is it something else? Okay, and some really good albums. Super Grit had a very long run. In fact, they still do some shows. Clyde and 13 are still, the fiddler, 13 are still make up Super Grit, some additional musicians. The bass player last night, Jason Smith, if I'm not mistaken, when Super Grit does shows, and they don't do that many anymore, but when they do shows, he's normally in the band, Super Grit. And the drummer at the show was people a little bit younger than me would probably know very well. If you're familiar with the rock band Cry of Love from the 1990s, they had a pretty big hit with Peace Pipe. I think it charted real high on the album-oriented rock Billboard charts in '93 or something like that. Well, Jason Patterson was the drummer for Cry of Love, and he was the drummer for this show. So first I'll let you see Bill doing, or the band doing, one of Bill's songs. It's called When I Ride, which he put out as a single 45 before he signed with RCA, which is about feeling free. a good story about that Super Grit Cowboy Band. They based in North Carolina, of course, but they played up and down, up into Virginia and on up into the Northeast sometimes. If you remember, there was a big club in New York City, the Lone Star Cafe, I believe it was called, and that was the happening place, I guess, in the 80s maybe. And Super Grit had occasion to go up to New York and play at Lone Star Cafe. And lo and behold, who might have been in attendance but Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones. And the story is that Jagger and his entourage were just on the front row table, and Jagger was up on top of the table dancing and hooping and hollering and having a huge time. And between songs, he leans over and asks Clyde, he said, "I love them. What do you call your band?" And without missing a beat, Clyde says, "Call them Super Grit. What do you call your band?" Of course, he knew who it was, but he was just, yeah, I know that was pretty good. Well, anyway, an article ran in the Raleigh paper about how big the show, how great Super Grit was. We've been going to see Super Grit for 3 or 4 years or more, and they normally played at a small place when they were in Raleigh. When we would often go to Raleigh to see them, a place called the Cafe Deja Vu, a great little club, didn't hold that many people. It's in what was called the Village Underground. It's under the parking lot of a Cameron Village, old-timey shopping center in Raleigh, and had a lot of like head shops and venues for music. They had a Frog and Nightgown was a jazz club there. The Pier had lots of national acts, and Cafe Deja Vu had mainly your local acts playing there. Well, week after the article about Super Grit was in the Raleigh News and Observer, and it had the quote about Mick Jagger and some real high praise for the band. We show up our usual time to go catch them at the Cafe Deja Vu, and good gosh, that whole walk down a big stairway into the underground area and a long walkway to the clubs, and they were backed up all the way up above to the parking lot level, lined up, people to go see Super Grit. All of a sudden, all the hip people decided, that was the band that they needed to see. Well, we just turned around and left. We'll see them again somewhere else. There was no way. The place probably hold 200 people, and there were probably well over 500 people in line to try to get in there to hear them. But Super Grit, they charted in the 50s on the country radio, a few songs. One of their band members, Curtis Wright, when he left Super Grit after a few years, he actually came down from Pennsylvania and joined the band. But when he left, he went to Nashville and wrote some hit songs for various acts. A song for Shenandoah, I believe, was big, and a few other artists. I think maybe Randy Travis recorded one of his songs. And then he was lead singer for, I think, the Shenandoah Band when their lead singer left. And was lead singer for a revitalized Pure Prairie League for a little while, stuff like that. But he recorded some major label albums as a duo with his songwriting partner. And a lot of people have come through Super Grit Band. Now, they started in '77, so what is that, 43 years? So Clyde is kind of, there's Clyde in his younger days. Clyde is kind of a mentor, the godfather of country and bluegrass and rock in eastern North Carolina. He's been playing since the 1950s, and when he was a teenager. And he's 82 or 3 now. Here's Clyde taking lead vocals and guitar with one of his one of the favorite Super Grit songs that he wrote, called "Carolina by the Sea." Blues was important. Now Bill kind of evolved over the years into a blues artist or a blues rock artist by the 1980s or so. And Bill's moved to Spain, and he's lived, I don't know, maybe a decade. He's lived in Spain most of the year and tours in Europe. So if you're in Europe watching this, if you see a guy named Bill Lyerly coming into your area to play a show, then I highly recommend you check him out. But he comes home for a few months each year, visit with family, and you take care of business back home and things like that. And he does dates as the Bill Lyerly Band, or in this case with Clyde, as collaboration with Clyde and these other guys. And usually it's a blues show. Now this was more of a country rock show. I'd say about 30% of it was country, about 40% of it was country rock, and at least 30 more percent was blues. The bass player, Jason Smith, did he did several tunes, Bakersfield Sound tunes. He did 3 Buck Owens songs and 4 or 5 Merle Haggard songs when he was singing lead. Bill did his original songs and some covers and some blues covers and things like that. Clyde played some of his original stuff. Clyde mainly played the steel guitar all night. Now here's they are doing the John Lee Hooker classic, Boom Boom Boom. Now let me remind you, Clyde Mattocks is 83 years old here, and don't let anybody tell you that you got to stop doing great things when you get old. He's 83. He's been doing this for 65 or more years, and he joins right in on the electric guitar, and it's really good. So hats off to Clyde. Clyde is the mentor for so many. He's produced so many young people trying to get started in the music business. Produced so many of their CDs and albums, He's played when the alt country got real big, and Raleigh, North Carolina was kind of a base for alt country. Whiskey Town and $2 Pistols and Backsliders, I believe. They were all based in the Raleigh area. When they were big in, I guess it was the 80s or 90s, when they were big, well, they would call on Clyde to come in and play steel guitar for them and things like that during, you know, when they were doing recording sessions. And he's nurtured the Malphus brothers when they were, you know, little kids like 12 and 16 years old, and started performing, doing gigs, playing classic country music. Clyde was in there playing with them, producing their music, and you know, going to shows and playing for them. So you know, Clyde's a very important person in music, even though he's not known nationally. Anybody in music knows who Clyde Mattocks is here in North Carolina. So I'll finish it out here with their rendition of Boom, Boom, Boom. Well, we'll see you folks in the next video. Hope everybody has a great weekend. And I'll just say, remember, be kind to your neighbors, because everybody is your neighbor.